the scaphoid. And the way we're going to do it is you would take a cassette and you would divide it into, you take 4 projections on this one cassette. So if this is my film right here, you know, I'd cover up this half, and here's the area I would expose. And then the next exposure would be here. And then here and here, okay? That's how we would do this. So we divide the cassette into 4ths and take our exposure. So, the first projection on all of these, the patient is positioned with their hand in ulnar deviation. So all 4 of these is with ulnar deviation. You know, the fingertips go towards the ulna as much as possible. We take our first one with the central ray perpendicular. The second projection, we would angle our tube 10 degrees towards the elbow. I think your book even may use the term cephalic. Then you would angle 20 degrees. And then the last one you would angle 30 degrees. And the centering point is the scaphoid for all of these. So just to recap real quick, make sure you have your notes right. 4 projections on one film. Place the hand in ulnar deviation and angle our tube 0 degrees, which is perpendicular, 10 degrees, 20, and 30 towards the elbow, or the other term you can use is cephalic on that. And what it's done to demonstrate, it's done to demonstrate the scaphoid with minimal superimposition. You know how we talked about in the scaphoid kind of sits like this, right here, to where it's kind of self-superimposed, where this area of the scaphoid here is underneath the top part of it. So look up here at your radiograph. So as I'm angling my tube, here's the scaphoid. So this is a 0 degree angle. And then I angle 10 degrees. I'm elongating it a little bit more, right? Look at 20 degrees compared to 0 degrees at the scaphoid. It's longer even more. And then look at the 30 degree. You see how we've elongated it? We're completely removing that self-superimposition. We're straightening out the entire scaphoid. Is there any questions about the Raffert-Long method?
Okay, so you're angling it like...
Yeah, like this right here. So here I am, here's my x-ray tube here, so 20 degrees or 30 degrees towards the elbow.
Okay.
Okay?
Also like this.
It's like this right here.
Okay. Just want to get the
Perpendicular, 10, 20, or 30. So that will show the scaphoid with minimal superimposition. Another thing that you'll see in clinicals, they'll order a scaphoid series. And these are the projections usually that the doctors, if they say a scaphoid series and you don't know what to do, these are the projections up here that they'll do in clinical. They'll do a PA wrist. They'll do a PA oblique wrist, because when we rotate the wrist, we're looking at the scaphoid and the trapezium, right? Then they'll do an ulnar deviation. And even though the radial deviation doesn't show the scaphoid, they'll throw that in just for a comparison purpose. So a scaphoid series can include these 4 over here. Is there any question? There's 2 ways to do a scaphoid series. One, the Raffert-Long, which is the 4 projections. Or, if we don't do the Raffert-Long, we do the common routine projections, which is a PA wrist, a PA oblique wrist, ulnar and radial deviation of the wrist. Are y'all with me right now? Okay. Now you've got all of the special projections. Raffert-Long is one of the things you should do.
What all do you
you have at least half the metacarpals and half, a fourth of the radius and ulna. So, you know, like you do for a regular wrist. Okay, so, yes,
We will be doing the racket long,
Yes.
not the other scaphoid series.
correct, because those are things we already do.
Okay.
You'll have already tested them on PA and PA oblique.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so, for fractures, the boxer fracture is just a fracture of the fifth metacarpal. It will be seen at either the shaft or the body is what the shaft is, or the neck of the fifth metacarpal. And it's usually brought on by punching something, you know, if somebody gets mad, they punch the wall, they punch the dash board in a car, a window, something they punch, you'll see, or reach somebody else. You'll see a boxer fracture. So it's either gonna be at the neck or the shaft of the fifth metacarpal. Other fractures that you have to know, let's first talk about a Colles fracture, because it's the most common. In order to be a Colles fracture, you have to have a transverse fracture of the distal radius. What does that mean? A transverse fracture of the distal radius. So here's my distal radius. A transverse fracture just means it's going all the way across my radius. Also, that fractured end, so if I'm fractured here, the distal portion is what we're, from the distal portion of the fracture line, is posteriorly displaced. So it's going to sit back towards the posterior side, going towards the posterior surface. And it doesn't have to have it, but generally it will. There will also be a chip fracture of the styloid process of the ulna. Where's your styloid process of your ulna? Remember that little point that the ulna comes down to? There'll be the little point will just be broke off. It doesn't always have to be, but generally that is a part of a Colles fracture. So know that it is a transverse fracture, meaning it goes across the radius. It is posteriorly displaced. And most generally, you're going to have a styloid process fracture of the ulna as well. Anytime you see, when do you think we would get a Colles fracture? You'll see these a lot in the wintertime, or old
When they
people.
catch themselves.
They catch themselves, they fall, our instinct is to throw our hand out, catch ourselves, it breaks, posteriorly pushes it back from that. The exact opposite is a Smith's fracture. A Smith's fracture, again, is a transverse fracture of the radius, but this time it is anteriorly displaced. So the fractured area is going to point anteriorly. See, if you look at this fracture, here it's fractured, and see how the fractured part is going towards the anterior surface in front of the radius. It does not, there's no involvement of the styloid process of the ulna. You don't have to worry about that. So look up here, on anything we do, fingers, hands, wrists, chest, lumbar spine, anything that we ever do, a PA or an AP projection, you can see that there's a fracture right here, correct? You can see the fracture here. But it's not until you turn them up and do the lateral that you can tell if it's anteriorly or posteriorly displaced, or if the foreign object is anteriorly or posteriorly placed in the abdomen or wherever. So you can turn it up here then and see, just like this one out here is anteriorly. This is pointed to the anterior surface. This is going to the back of the hand and wrist. The fracture is going posteriorly. And yours found is the name of it, or is that what's in the name of yours on your power? At this stage of the game, you should be able to label this hand. Can you? Or do I need to do it for you?
I have all but two.
Huh?
I have all of them but two. On here.
Oh, you have all of this but two, I'm thinking.
No.
Okay, I'm
Like
thinking.
a name.
All right, so let's just go through it real quickly, okay? Because I don't want to spend a lot of time on labeling when it's something y'all can do. A is the third proximal phalanx. B is the third metacarpal. C is the trapezium. D is the capitate. E is the hamate. F is the navicular or scaphoid. G is the lunate. H, radius. I, ulna. Yep. All right, good. First thing, this is just something real quick that you should, I hope you've recognized, I don't know if you do or not. We know this as a child because you can see the epiphyseal plates not fused on a kid. You see that? So we know that this is a kid that's still growing. Because after they quit growing, those fuse together and we don't see that any longer. So you always know when it's a kid x-ray because you can see all the epiphyseal plates on there. All right. So, have I gone over how to critique these things roughly when we did the hands or the notes and stuff? So let's just run through. Mentally, what do I look at when I look at a PA projection of the hand?
Curvature.
Huh?
Curvature and long axis.
Okay, so let's just go through my thought process. The first thing I look for is all of my anatomy included.
Yeah.
So that means distal phalanx to radius and ulna. And then the fifth and first digit. So as I can see up there, this is clipped. The third distal phalanx is clipped. The fourth is pretty dang close, but I don't have to say what it is, I just have to say anatomy's clipped. The other thing I'm looking at then, after I look for my anatomy, am I positioned properly? Well, the first thing I'm gonna look at is I want your radius and ulna to be running with the long axis of the cassette, along with the anatomy, the hand we're looking at. So we're not, we have some ulnar deviation going on here. So the radius and ulna should be running straight up and down my cassette as well, when I'm doing a PA projection of the hand.
So how would we word that critiquing wise?
Radius and ulna is not with the long axis of the cassette. The other thing I'm looking for then, is it flat or is there rotation? And remember we talked about the concavity of the phalanx. I'm not looking at the fifth one. I'm not even gonna look really at the distal, because sometimes fingers curl, right? You put your hand down, everybody's got some curvature. So I'm gonna usually look about the third proximal and the fourth proximal phalanx are the two that I'm looking at, third and fourth. Because if they're straight, then the rest of the hand, you can't keep those two straight and curl your other fingers up. You can't raise your metacarpal up. So does this fourth one, do they look pretty, I mean, they're always gonna be a little bit off because that's just how the bones are formed. But do they look pretty much symmetrical? Yes. Yes. So the hand is not rotated. Another thing you can look at is there should be space between the third and fourth metacarpal head and the fourth and fifth metacarpal head. Remember, they should not be touching. So if you have a radiograph on your test, you have to critique all three of them. Is this a good radiograph? And you're gonna say PA, whatever, oblique, whatever, lateral. So you're critiquing all three, or two projections, whatever's there. You're gonna critique each one of them. And you have to tell me it's good or it's bad on each one. So let's look up here. This would be the wrong orientation on my cassette, because we always said if I had to do 3 on one, the lateral faces off the cassette. But I'm not even gonna get into that with y'all. So let's critique all of these. Let's start with the oblique. We talked about you have to have at least half the metacarpal and a fourth of the radius and ulna. Do I have that on this radiograph? If you've got all of the metacarpals, then you know that you've got a fourth of the radius and ulna, because you think about how one metacarpal is, and you go up, because it should be equal, right? The other thing I'm looking at a 45-degree oblique, are they positioned properly? There should be some form of a joint space between the trapezium and the trapezoid. You won't see it all the way up the trapezium and trapezoid, but you will see a portion of it, like this right here. So that tells me that it's 45 degrees. So this is a good radiograph.
What was the one where it's turned, that you have to have space in between all the?
That's oblique hand.
Okay.
Now, don't critique your wrist like you would the hand when you're looking at those metacarpals, because of the divergent beam. Okay, so that's all I'm looking at, is that space between the trapezium and the trapezoid. Now, let's go to our lateral. On a lateral, again, we have to have the same amount of anatomy, a fourth and a fourth. I mean, a half and a fourth. Oh, gosh. Oh. And then I'm looking at the distal radius and ulna. Are they superimposed? Because as I move up the forearm, they're going to start separating because of the way that the arm is built. But I'll look at the distal radius and ulna. Are they superimposed? Yes. So that tells me that they were in a true lateral position. On your test, you may have to tell me if it's rotated, how to correct it. So you need to be able to look and see, would I roll it forward or would I have to roll it back? Well, obviously this one's perfect. You don't have to do anything to it. But we know how to do that because we talked about it, I know, last week when the radius was in front of the ulna. And just put your hand up there in that position. If your radius is in front of your ulna, then it's rolled forward, right? You can feel it. If the radius is anterior or posterior, and then that would be how you would tell me which direction to go. And then on the PA. On the PA, do I have half of the metacarpals, a fourth of the radius and ulna? I have all of the metacarpals up there, though. If I've got the third digit, I mean, I have half the thumb. I don't have to have all of it, but I have it. Do I have, I mean, that's all you have to check, really, guys. You should have, you can look at your metacarpals, make sure they're not superimposed, because that, if they're superimposed, that means that it's rotated. Do you have joint spaces open around some of the carpals? You can look at the, you see how we have some joint spaces we can see? But that's all you really have to check. You don't have to, if I didn't have these joint spaces around some of these carpals, then I don't have my hand in a fist. If I don't have these joint spaces around these carpals, then my hand is straight, not in the fist. Remember, I'm reducing that OID. You will have some special projections on your test. You will have to answer questions about them, not so much as critique them. So you'll have to recognize them. So and this would be an example, it's not gonna be multiple choice, but here you go. What position is the patient wrist in for this radiograph?
The gray heart.
Nope. The gray heart, the gainer heart, you're
Gainer
driving
heart.
through that tunnel.
Oh, that's right.
Remember, it's in the tunnel.
AP oblique.
I see a little bone sitting out there all alone,
Pisiform.
and that's the pisiform. I sure wish I had my little laser pointer. Here's the pisiform. So it's an AP oblique.
Yeah.
This person's got some cystic problems going on in their bones. Do you see that down there on the radius? So they got some major issues going on. Some areas right there in that, carpals too. There might be more than one thing wrong with this, but other things wrong with it, don't shout out an answer. Everybody kind of give them an answer right here as to what could be wrong with this. All right, so tell me, who thinks it's A? Raise your hand. B. C. And D. The answer is B. The first thing, let's go back, I'm gonna go back one, or a couple of films. On a hand, and this one's not straight either, but you should look at the distal phalanx, and we should see the joint space. That tells me on a PA projection of the hand that the fingers were extended and parallel. So now, look at this one right here, look at these joint spaces. Let's go back to this one. Do you see how this is curved? They're foreshortened. Look how that distal phalanx is foreshortened. So they curved their fingers up. They didn't extend their digits. Look right down here. You can almost see this bone overlap. Do you see that shadow? Do you see the shadow right here? That tells me that they didn't extend those digits. They're curving underneath the other. And the hand is rotated. How did you determine that the hand is rotated?
Metacarpal.
Look at this third metacarpal. You see how there's more concavity?
Phalanx?
Yeah, I'm sorry. On this phalanx, look how there's more concavity on this proximal phalanx than on this side of it. So which way are they rotated? They went laterally. The concavity, the more concavity there is, that side is up off the cassette.
So you would say they are rotated laterally?
Yes, no, go the other way. There you go. They're rotated laterally, yes. The other thing that I see obviously with this hand is the radius and ulna's not straight, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that's another problem. I mean, that's not one of your choices, but that's another problem on there.
I thought you said to just look at the third and fourth digits
The third and fourth,
when we were critiquing.
yeah,
Okay,
that's the third one,
okay,
and that's the one I'm looking at.
okay.
But then also, look down here at the radius and ulna. You see how they're not
Yeah.
straight?
Yeah.
So we need to align the radius and ulna up with the long axis of the cassette. This right here, look at this here in the thumb. There's a little bit of something up here. Obviously, that looks like it's inside there, right? So I don't know what they got going on, but there's something in there that's hard and calcifying. Look right here, there's something that's calcifying too. Okay, so this wrist, let's critique this wrist. So Alicia, let's start with the PA. So tell me what you think about this PA projection of the wrist.
The anatomy's clipped.
Anatomy's clipped because do I have half the metacarpals?
No.
No,
So it's not centered right.
they're not centered correctly, that's correct. Because I have a whole lot more of the radius in ulna than I do the metacarpals. So, we're not centered to the mid-carpal. But does everybody see that? Okay. What about your lateral, Alicia? What do you think?
They're rotated to be toward the ulna.
Okay, so let me help you out.
Right.
So the first thing I'm looking for is my anatomy included. Do I have? Don't let yourself get sidetracked by rotation. Check your anatomy. Do I have half the metacarpals here? No. So I need to include my anatomy is clipped. Now then, the radius is the larger of the two bones. Y'all see the radius. Can everybody depict the radius from the ulna? So here's the radius.
So it's forward.
It is anterior to the ulna. So what they've done is they've rotated, they're like this right here. So I need to roll to correct it, if I ask you how to correct it, you would need to roll the wrist backwards. You need to take the radius back onto the ulna, okay? Elise, you got it?
Yeah.
Because you got that puzzled look on your face.
It's just hard to see.
Which is which.
So I'm looking for the,
No, they're
You're rotated medially.
Okay, so
sorry.
They are basically like this right here. So you can feel, here's the
It's my
radius,
hair?
and here's the ulna.
Yeah, I was
So that's
doing
what the
that.
radiograph is
but-
showing. The radius is in front of this ulna, so they need to roll it back, to take the radius back onto the ulna.
So we would just say
Okay.
the radius would go backwards.
Yeah, I'm not using.
So you just say forward,
Is
backward.
this one?
If you have to correct it, yes,
Oh, no.
that's what I said.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
All right, am I good to move on? Calvin?
So we just say on there, we just need to,
forward,
it's
backward.
rotated too far.
This is what I would say.
Radius.
Is this a good radiograph explain? That's your question typically, right?
Uh-huh.
And the question is, the answer would be no, anatomy is clipped and it is rotated. All right, that's easy enough. How would you correct this radiograph is when you tell me then that you roll it back.
Okay.
Okay.
You do not have to correct it unless the question asks for you to correct it. Now, if you correct it, if you give me too wrong information, then, you know, you're just setting yourself up for some
Yeah.
further
I did that a few
critiquing.
times.
It happens, it happens.
Do we need to include not just
Yes. And then you all can see that both of these are not centered correctly, right, because the anatomy is flipped. Okay, here we go, let's do this one. So, if this is on your test, Christy, and I ask you what this is, then just look at how the hand's positioned. It's a special projection.
Is it this hand? I don't
It
see a
is-
thumb.
Well, look at your radius and ulna.
Which side is the
So-
radius?
Here's the radius, here's the ulna.
So
your
it's
left
this
hand.
hand,
That's your left hand.
It's,
how's the
it's
round?
my left hand.
and it's radial deviation.
Very good, yay, that's right. I need to start bringing some candy and throwing it out. So it is radial deviation. So I could ask you, what's the centering point for this radius? I'm not gonna ask you to critique them. If it's a special projection, we're not gonna critique. All right, I've lightened your load.
I don't know about that.
I've lightened it. So see, there's my Thanksgiving gift to you.
Thank you.
But you do have to be able to recognize them.
Okay.
And then just be able to answer questions like, what's the centering point, which is mid-carpals? What's being demonstrated? The medial interspaces. What does that mean, medial interspaces? It means the joint spaces between the carpals on the medial side. So we're looking at these carpals. See how good that triquetral and the lunate, the joint spaces between them? That's my goal. That's,
It's MO in your joint spaces on the medial side of that, you
yes,
said?
yeah. That's all you have to know. See how
Okay.
simple that was?
Yeah.
All right. Everybody get them an answer for this. raise their hand and see who's got what, but has everybody got an answer before I call on, or before we raise our hands? Who says it's an AP? AP oblique. How do you know it's not an AP oblique, Madison?
Since the
Well,
radius.
plus I don't see the pisiform for your superimposition, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Is it a PA? How about a PA oblique? Wrong.
I'm gonna say the next one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Clements
Yep.
Nakayama is the one. And I'll tell you why it's a Clements.
'Cause you have the ulna.
Look at the end of the radius. I can tell that there's a tube angle on this. We don't angle our tube normally for a PA oblique wrist, right? Just a center raised perpendicular. Look how elongated the end of this radius is and how it extends way up in the carpals. So when you have a tube angle, it's going to throw things. So what it's doing, it's throwing that radius up into that. I mean, you're gonna see it a little bit, you'll have a little bit, but you're not gonna see it that much. So when you're studying, compare slide 10 to a normal PA oblique wrist, so that you can see the difference side by side.
And that's because the angle's going that way.
That's
correct?
because the angle is, we're 45 degrees distally,
Distally.
so we're throwing that radius down into the carpals.
Is that why the metacarpals,
Look elongated?
Yeah.
Yes.
they look like they're in front of one of those mirrors?
Yes,
That change.
that's exactly right. So I can ask you, what's the centering point for this radiograph, Marie? And you would say it is the,
Oh, 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 oh,
that little.
No.
yes!
Well, you at least gets all excited, don't you? The anatomical snuff box, and we're demonstrating the trapezium. Look at that trapezium up there. See how everything, it's free of superimposition. There's the trapezoid is not on it at all. I can see the joint space between the trapezium and the trapezoid. Remember when we did an oblique wrist? And that's another thing that you can check. Remember when we did the oblique wrist, we would only see a portion of that joint space between the trapezium and the trapezoid? When you do the Clements Nakayama, you see it all. So that's another way you can tell the Clements Nakayama from a regular PA oblique. So if you're having trouble with that whole angle in the tube and seeing if it's elongated, if you see the entire joint space between the trapezium and trapezoid, it's a Clements Nakayama. Sharon, you had your hand up.
Is there another name for the snuff box? Because I've.
No, we're not gonna go by no other name. That's all you'll ever need to know for x-rays.
Okay.
That's all you'll have to know. I'm not gonna ask you, the registry is not gonna ask you any other question but snuff box.
Okay. 'Cause
Okay.
I've seen some other stuff and I just wanted.
No, that's all
Okay.
you need to know.
Okay.
Okay. Let's compare, let's look back here. Compare this one, look at the joint space here between the first metacarpal and the trapezium. Look at the space between the trapezium and the trapezoid, okay? So this is a Clements Nakayama. Now compare this. See, we do not see that joint space between the thumb, the metacarpal, and the trapezium as well. You certainly don't see the joint space here, do you? So,
And
that's how, so compare them, if you're having trouble, go back to a normal PA oblique wrist and compare them. Okay,
Bless
so
you.
let's critique these real quick. Where does time go when you're? I
Having
mean,
fun.
It's like 5 till 11.
Yep.
Wow.
Keep going.
Holy cow.
Talk faster.
I guess I'm gonna have to
Talk
talk
faster.
faster. Don't let y'all talk too much. So let's look at this lateral. Do I have a fourth of the, do I have a half of the metacarpals?
Yes.
If I have over that donut, so then I'm gonna have enough radius and ulna.
Yeah.
Is the radius and ulna on top of each other?
Yes.
Yes. Am I centered at the mid-carpals?
Yes.
Good lateral of wrist. On the oblique, again, do I have my anatomy?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now I have to check for rotation. Is it 45 degrees?
Yes.
Do I see a portion of the joint between the trapezium and the trapezoid? It's a good 45-degree oblique.
Can you point that out?
Yeah.
That,
It looks like they're superimposed.
Is that,
Or is that a
No,
joint space?
that's a little bit of a joint space, that's good.
Okay.
Because look at them here.
now
See
they
how
are.
that was over?
Mhm.
So you're gonna see a little bit of a joint space right there. On the open, let's talk about the PA. Do I have the proper anatomy?
Yeah, it's clipped a
I'm
little.
getting pretty dang close, am I
Yeah.
not? And
It's
you know
close.
why I'm getting close?
It's
Because
centered.
I'm not centered properly. Am I at the mid-carpals, or have I centered up, compare them with the others?
Yeah, you
I
went up.
centered up a little bit higher than mid-carpals, I centered like at the base of the metacarpals. So then that's why I'm not getting as much radius in ulna, because I'm improperly centered on this one.
So we would say the anatomy's clipped on that one, or,
You'd say
I
improperly
would say
centered.
improperly centering,
okay.
yeah. Marie? They have an artifact in there. What do you think that is?
A Band-Aid.
No. You know those bands that they wrap, that they spring their wrist and they wrap them, and you know those little
The
metal
metal.
clamps that clamp it and holds it? Yeah, that's what that is on there. So their wrist was wrapped and they didn't take the metal off of it, and they should take that little metal piece off. Cause if they fracture the metacarpal right there, even though they're doing a wrist, I mean, it could be in it, could be in this area. So there's an artifact that needs to be removed. Marie, how would you correct this radiograph besides moving the artifact?
no.
Okay, look right here. Look at this bone here. Here's this edge, and here's this edge. And then here's an edge, and here's an edge. So the fatter of the two is the radius. It's anterior, so roll your wrist forward just a little bit. They're not quite that much, but they're like that. Because they've taken the radius in front of the ulna. So we need to correct it by rolling the wrist, yes, backwards.
Which comes wrong, or are you gonna ask us if, how to correct it?
If I wanna know that, yes, it'll say how to correct this.
Otherwise, just leave the correction on.
Correct.
Unless you wanna get it wrong.
Unless.
Unless you wanna have the
Unless there's a
opportunity
possibility of
to
getting it
get it.
wrong. Because sometimes we have a tendency to just go on and on and on,
Oh,
and then we say the wrong thing, right? So Kylie? What position am I in for this? They got a fracture too, do y'all see the fracture? Pretty big fracture, all the way across there. You want Bradley to help? AP oblique, because look at that pisiform sitting out there all along. I mean, that's really all along, and that's really good. Everybody get them an answer for this. You don't have to do this on the test. There's a finger on your test, and you're gonna have to tell me what it is. So, do you see, first of all, don't answer, nobody answer out loud, but do you see why you want to include more than just the digit that you're looking at?
Yeah.
This is the why. This is it. Everybody give an answer, then we're gonna raise our hands and see what it is.
Yeah, I'm just guessing.
That's all right, that's what we're here for.
We're all guessing.
Every expert was once a beginner.
Okay.
Okay, so we've all been in your chairs right there before. So, who says it's A, the second PIP joint? B, C, D, and E. Whoever said it was A, A is correct. And the reason why, you can tell, you see this fat right here? That's this area right here going to your thumb.
Okay, I can see
Because
that
on
now.
the fifth digit, there's nothing out there. Did you get it right, David?
Well, I don't know. Look at my hand. There's a lot there on that fifth digit. That's what I was.
You have that curve in your right
Yes.
hand, okay?
See, that's what I was looking at.
Smash it.
And I was so
Okay.
confident that it was a pinky.
You were so confident. That's why, but this is one reason we wanna open that collimator up to include a little bit of each digit, because we gotta make sure we know what it is. I mean, we're gonna know, but it's gonna be hard for you guys to know.
Look at that pad.
Is this a good finger x-ray? And the answer is no. First of all, remember when we're doing the digits have to be parallel to the film. That means I'm gonna see open joints. Is the
There's no-
PIP joint open?
No.
That's because it's bent. They've let them bend their finger up a little bit. And then where it's not flat, I mean, it's rotated, right? You see that there's not equal concavity? Okay.
It's just a wreck.
It is a wreck. All right. This radiograph is not good. First of all, turn the collimator box with the hand. Doesn't that look like crap?
Yes.
It does. It just doesn't look good. All right. Another thing that's wrong with this is there's rotation. Look at your third proximal phalanx. Is there equal concavity there?
No.
You can see that they're not equal on any of the phalanxes. But really the third, let's look at it. Because you can't rotate that third without rotating the hand. I mean, you can't, the others can't be flat and only the third one be turned. It's impossible. So there's not equal concavity. So my hand is a little bit rotated and it's laterally rotated. And that's generally the most common mistake is they let that patient kind of relax their hand instead of putting it flat down. So if you just let them put their hand up there and relax, it's gonna be laterally rotated a little bit. They gotta flatten that hand down. Radius and ulna is not running straight on the cassette either. Do you see a common theme?
Nobody's straight.
Common mistake.
Would you say that their second digit is curved, like
Their
kind of
se-
bent?
their- This digit right here, look at it compared to these.
Yeah.
It's bent.
So they let that finger bend up a little bit too. That is correct. Honey?
Are we gonna have to say what way they're rotated?
Not unless I ask you.
And, are they rotated to the side that's straighter?
The side that's straighter is closest to the film.
Okay, and
The
that's-
curvature side is the side that's up. Yes, yeah,
Okay.
like that. All right, everybody get them an answer. Marker is wrong, but marker is not gonna be an issue on your test, because I'm not gonna have it on there, or it is an issue.
This stuff, like, this is the first-
So
What's
everybody
up
get
with
them an
that
answer.
pinky?
A, B, C. The most common problem is D. Anatomy's clip, look, radius and ulna has to be included on the hand. We've clipped that proximal row of the carpals even. So that has to be included. This person has a boxer fracture, y'all see it? And then they also have some kind of outgrowth here on the,
Pinky.
off of their, distal phalanx of the fifth digit. Over here, something here, they got something weird going on.
First metacarpal.
Oh, that's a sesame.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why do they break their pinky?
Why do they break it?
Or your metacarpal, your fib?
They hit it, that's the pressure, because of the way the,
So they hit right here?
they hit straight on here, and the pressure, however it's distributed across the hand, that's the one that takes the pressure.
Is this like the weakest point of the hand?
Yes, it's a weak, small.
But I guess 'cause it's.
It's a thinner, it's a smaller bone than the other metacarpals,
So it's not as strong?
and so it's not as strong to take the pressure.
So they need to hold a roll of quarters.
And here, we've already covered this once, the fractures, make sure you know your fractures. A Bennett's fracture, another one that we did not cover, is a fracture of the base of the first metacarpal, which extends into the carpal metacarpal joint. You see how it's kind of pushed down into that joint space? And that is
When you hold your
the most
thumb.
common fracture of the first digit.
How does that happen? Is that from punching people too with your thumb in your?
Yeah.
No, I don't know how it happens.
You slap somebody the wrong way.
Would that be
No,
close
I
to your
don't know
side?
what happens, unless somebody takes it and
And they might.
bend it, they may take it and bend it back, but I
That
don't
seems
know.
very painful.
Here, we've already talked about a boxer's fracture, so we're way ahead of the game. A Hutchinson fracture is also known as a Schoeffer fracture.
A what?
Or a say it for me.
Schoeffer?
Schoeffer fracture. The way they say it's a fracture of the styloid process of the radius.
Is that from
And they-
driving a lot?
The reason, they say the reason why, the old, this is going, when they have to go out there and self-crank the cars and turn it, and it was from turning that handle is where they would get that, and that's why they named it that.
Huh.
Anyway, I don't know from the pressure, and I don't know if it's a ligament or something that pulls the end of it off, the tip of it off, I don't know, but anyway.
Is it the radius?
All right, let's move on, because I'm a minute over already.
Talk faster.
There's rotation because you can see there's not equal concavity of the proximal phalanx. This is, what's the centering point for this radiograph, Elise?
MCP.
Can you be more specific, because I would count you wrong.
Oh. Oh, the digit. Oh, wait. What?
First MCP,
Oh, first?
because it's the thumb.
Oh.
So it's a first MCP, so you have to be very specific.
Okay.
So if I'm asking you a finger, and if you don't tell me the
Second,
second
third,
PIP
fourth.
or the fifth PIP, then it's gonna be wrong, because we have more than the one, correct? So, and you can see that it's rotated because we do not have equal concavity. If I ask you the, demonstration on this, it would be
Oh, no
Oh,
deviation.
that's not that's not the demonstration, the
Oh,
scaffold is
scaffold.
the demonstration.
Oh, sorry.
All right, because it is an ulnar deviation, but. Christie, what method is this?
The Gaynard Hart, the
You
stop
see
and
the
the
tunnel?
Dad, a
name of
girl.
love.
Stop with the name of love, but do you see the tunnel that you're gonna drive through
Yeah,
right there?
there.
All right,
The tunnel of love.
so then I could ask you questions about this as far as central ray, centering point, demonstration, those kind of things. But be able to recognize a Gaynor Hart. Here's just showing you a fracture of the proximal phalanx. This is not a good oblique thumb, and the reason for that is
They're boo-boo.
the anatomy is clipped. Remember, you have to have all of the trapezium when we're doing any thumb x-ray. And we do not have the trapezium. We've already critiqued the PA projection of the hand. We can see that this one, I hope you can see that it's rotated right here. Let's talk about the oblique real quick. The one thing that I want you to check when you do an oblique, obviously the anatomy being included, but to tell if it's a 45-degree rotation, you look at the base of the third, fourth, and fifth metacarpal. They should be slightly superimposed on top of each other, and you should still have a space between the bodies of the third, fourth, and fifth. You see this slight space here and this space here.
So they should be superimposed somewhat and have a space?
They should be, the heads should be slightly superimposed.
So what was wrong with it?
We haven't got there yet.
Oh.
So that's what we check for rotation. Is it 45 degrees? And if it is, the body will have space between it, but the heads will be slightly superimposed. The other thing I want you to critique, other than having the anatomy on there, make sure that the soft tissue from one digit is not superimposed over the bone of another digit. See how this finger, look at this fifth digit? You see how that fifth digit is superimposed over the soft tissue, and that's fine. Now, if that soft tissue was over that bone, then you would have to make note of that. You see the fracture this person has at the base of the fifth proximal phalanx? You see that fracture?
Now I do.
I do now.
Yeah.
So is that was a okay radiograph?
Yes.
Okay.
Anatomy is clipped on all three of these projections. On the PA, the fingers are not extended. They are not slightly separated because the soft tissue of 5 is superimposing over the 4 right there. Do you see that? Which is barely skimming that. So we need to slightly separate, and the fingers are not extended because the joint spaces are not open. The oblique, anatomy is clipped, fingers are not separated, and it is over-rotated.
No spaces.
There is no space between 3 and 4, 4 and 5. You see how they're kind of all on top of each other?
Yeah.
So they're over-rotated. In the lateral, we can see that the hand is, the fingers are clipped and the thumb is clipped. The one thing I'm looking at, and it's light because I've lost something when I've tried to take a picture of this, is when you're critiquing a hand, you look at the metacarpals. Are the metacarpals superimposed? And that's what I'm trying to check to see if they're lateral. Don't so much look at the radius and ulna because, again, because of that divergent beam, it may throw them off. So look at the metacarpals to make sure that they are superimposed. PA rotated, oblique is, fingers are not superimposed. Something like this isn't gonna be on your test because look, this looks like it's over-rotated, this looks like it's under-rotated. And that's because of their anatomy, the way it's curved, so that's not something you have to worry about, so we're not gonna spend time on this. This is a lateral hand in extension. Are my metacarpals superimposed on top of each other?
Yeah.
I don't see one sitting out here all by itself, do I? So my metacarpals are superimposed, my thumb is included, distal phalanx, radius and ulna. But what I'm trying to show you is you can't look at the radius and ulna. You see how it looks like these are off, right?
Yeah.
But this is perpendicular. So on a hand, you look at the metacarpals. On a wrist, you look at radius and ulna. This kid has a fracture, and what type of fracture would you say this was? Here's the fracture, here's the radius, and here's the fractured part, so that is going posteriorly, so this is a Colles fracture. And you can even see right here on this oblique, you see that little fracture of the styloid process of the ulna? Right there. This lateral, what do we need to do with it? We need, how would I correct it?
Go
The radius is in front of the ulna, so I need to take the radius
Back.
The oblique, is it positioned properly? There is a joint space between the trapezium and the trapezoid, so that is a 45-degree oblique. And then on the PA, do I have all the anatomy that's required? I do, so it's good. David?
What fracture is it again?
Colles fracture.
Colles? Okay.
Colles, yes. The lateral is good. Radius and ulna is on top of each other, anatomy is included. The oblique is a 45-degree oblique because you see a little bit of a space between the trapezium and the trapezoid. But the problem is wrong centering point. Even though I have the anatomy, I have at least half the metacarpals, don't I? I have more than a fourth of the radius and ulna, but they did not center to the mid-carpal.
Looks like they're centered right at the
radius.
radial,
They centered right
joint.
here, right at the radius. Right where it's going down to the neck. problem with this radiograph is obviously centering point. They're not centered at mid-carpals. And if I was critiquing this, the radius, the lateral is in the wrong place. See how the anterior part of it's going towards these other projections? But that's not something I'm gonna have you worry about. And the other thing, the flasher, you see how it's superimposed over the anatomy that's required. So we need to get that out of there. You would have to mention that. What do you see? They did a PA, they did an oblique, and then they did another PA. What did they forget?
Lateral.
They forgot their lateral. But the PA and the oblique's good. Look, here I am. I've got the good 45-degree oblique, right? Marie, how would I fix this?
It's not, straight with the cassette.
All right, so we're not sure what this says, one. What else would you do? How would you correct it?
I would like to use the cassette.
Yes. You would fix the cassette, so, and then what else would you need to do with the positioning?
It would need to be centered more.
Okay. And?
Is it an oblique or is it a lateral?
It's supposed to be a lateral.
Okay, so it would need to go forward.
Go backward. Yeah.
Would it need to go backward?
Yeah, because look right here. Here's the radius.
So it's, okay, got it. It needs to go backward.
Yes, the radius is in front of the ulna, so it needs to go back. This is what a splint looks like on an x-ray. All right, so they
No.
come in, they couldn't take it off, it wasn't stable enough. I mean, look at the fracture. But I just wanted you to see what a splint looked like. We're not going to critique that. Obviously, you can tell what the problem is on the PA. The anatomy's clear. The fingers need to be separated. But on this lateral, how would I correct this lateral?
Rotate it back.
So look at your metacarpals. Are the metacarpals superimposed on top of each other?
No.
I see one out there all by itself. So now I have to determine, it's either gonna be 2 or 5. We know that 5 is a shorter metacarpal. So look here. You see this metacarpal? That's 5. So this would be 2 then. So if 2's in front,
Rotate it back.
you need to rotate it back.
And what did you say was wrong with the lateral?
Rotation is not proper.
Would we need,
It's rotated.
would we?
Who said they can't see it? Ben, please put your phone away.
I don't,
Did you tell the same thing with the radius ulna thing?
The problem is with the radius and ulna, they're going to be off most of the time on the lateral.
Oh, that's right.
Okay? So you've got
just wanna
2
break it there, that's all.
or you've got 5. Right here.
Cause I can see it easier now, cause I can blow it. So which one's 2?
Here's 2. There's 5. 5's the shorter.
The fingers,
All right.
the tissues going over onto that one.
Do we see the fingers on the oblique? What do we need to do?
Straighten them.
out, and it's too shallow of an oblique. 3 and 4, 4 and 5 is not superimposed. Metacarpal heads. So they did not rotate on 45 degrees, it's too shallow. Fingers on the PA is not extended. When you're doing a hand, and we're doing a fan lateral, my goal is to get the fingers from being superimposed on top of each other. The phalanxes will be, the proximal phalanx, the bases will be superimposed. I can't do anything about that. But these middle phalanx should be free of superimposition. So look at 5, look at the pinky. You see how the pinky is